Hey guys, this is Anish Jindal, and today we are going to be learning how to create menus in your application and preference screens in your application. So what a menu is it's essentially in the action bar at the top, and it can consist of icons such as this reload button, and also an overflow action menu, uh, which just is opened by clicking on the triple dots. And the reason it's being taught with settings is because frequently one of the overflow action buttons will be to the settings. And when you click on that, it'll take you to a settings screen such as this one. And because settings are used in almost every application, Google makes it very easy to basically build your settings screens. And in this video, you'll be learning how to do that, in addition to easily accessing the values that the user sets for each of them. First, we will create the new project. Ooh, sorry. Let's call it, how about menus and preferences demo. As always, we can leave everything here the same. And let's go with an empty activity. And we can leave it at main activity. And just hit finish and let it load. Some of the new things you guys will have to learn is that these resource files that you see here, or these directories, are not the only ones that actually exist. If you right click on res, you go to new, and you click on Android resource directory, you'll see that this resource type file actually contains many different types of files that you can have. However, they only put these 4 because I guess these are the most common ones. And to actually add menus, you actually choose the menu type. So I'll show this again, actually. So you're going to go to, in case you don't already have a menu directory here, right click on res, go to new, Android resource directory, and we are going to change the resource type to menu. And leave the directory name at menu. And let's just click OK. Okay, so now that we have a menu directory here, nothing's in it yet. So let's create a new menu XML. So you'll right click on that, new menu resource file. And because it'll be associated with activity main, let's call it activity main. And another reason I named it activity main is actually because the layout is called activity main. So it just helps keep it consistent. Everything associated with the main activity is activity underscore main. Okay, so unfortunately, when it comes to editing menus, there isn't the easy drag and drop layout like there's with, I guess, editing layouts. However, that's also because it's very much more straightforward. So kind of what you're doing is you see there's the menu. So all of these are falling in this menu section. There's menu, menu. And what you're doing is you are adding items. So if you put this, the left facing arrow, item, so you're adding items to it. And now you're just adding parameters just like, or attributes just like you do in a layout. So title is actually the name that'll show up. So the first one is settings. Okay, so that means when you look at our app, settings will appear. And the second thing we want to add is an ID, because just like with a layout, we have to use the ID to kind of refer to this menu item. And let's just call it settings. Okay, and then just close that, and we're done with this item. Now let's add another item, and this is actually for the reload button. And I'll show that we'll be doing later. But you see the difference here is that instead of having it in the overflow menu, we want it directly in the action bar. And we need an icon for it, whereas in settings we did not. So let's do that. So first, our title, it will be reload. Okay. The icon, well, we'll have to add something there. And I'll also show you how you can get material design icons directly from Google. And now we also want to always show it as an action instead of just being in the overflow menu. And you actually do that with show as action always. Okay. Now let's see. So we'll close that off. You see it's complaining. Basically what it's complaining about is that because we are using tools to let this run on older versions of Android, we have to change some things. And I'll just show you how to do that here. Basically what you'll do is you'll come up here and you'll just start typing in app, just press enter, and it added in something for us. Okay, you see XML and S. Don't really worry about what that means. And now we'll just change this to app. So originally it said Android for the show as action. Let's change it to app. Okay, and now that error went away. But now we have to add an icon here. So if you remember, all the icons go in drawable. Well, we haven't added anything yet. So how can we get a nice icon for that? Well, actually, Google provides a very nice set of resources. And part of this is material design icons for actions within our application. And I'll put this link in the description. So let's just search for reload. Nothing. Refresh. Okay, there we go. So click on refresh. It gives you a lot of options. Just because our action bar is blue, let's go with the white one and leave it at 24 dp. Basically all action bar icons should be 24 dp. That's what Google specifies. And we want to download the PNG. So once that's downloaded and you unzip the file, you'll see there are files for Android, iOS, and web. Obviously we'll go to Android. And these different, these are all different resolutions and sizes of the icon. It's to help, I guess the icons scale among different screen sizes. Let's just go with the middle, XHDPI. And if you remember, just do Control C here, and we will now copy it into the project. So we want to add it into drawable, so we can just do Control V, and let's just call it reload. Okay, great. And now, what we do is we just do the icon is in at drawable, and it's called reload. There we go. Okay, so it recognizes it. So that's always important. Great. So now we have created, these are the two menu items we will need in our application. We have a settings one, and we have a reload one. And yeah, okay. So I guess I'll demonstrate the purpose of reload. So what's going on is when we change the settings, so let's say we change this to Hello World 2. We can change the services to just take out mail and turn off notifications. When we go back, these changes are not immediately reflected, but when I click on reload, they then change. So basically that's the purpose. Okay, so now we have to actually tell the application to use this menu XML to display this menu, and we will actually do that in the main activity. So if you guys remember, onCreate is called when the application first starts. And likewise, what we need is there's an onCreate for the menu items. And that's actually called onCreate menu, options menu, onCreate options menu. Okay? And don't want to delete this line. But what we'll do is get menu inflator. So this is what will be used to basically inflate or start the menu. We'll do inflate, and we'll pass in r.menu.activity main. And the second parameter is just menu. and that's just what menu is just being passed in. So just go with it. Okay, great. So now this will start the menu. So if we ran this application, we would actually see this up here. Awesome. Okay, but now what we need to do is we need to have a way of knowing when one is clicked on. There's another function for that, and it's another one we'll override, and it's called on options items selected. Options menu, no. Options items selected, sorry. Okay. And the way we will do this is, well, first of all, this function is called whenever any options menu item is clicked on. And we're just pass the item. So if you're familiar with switches in Java, great. If not, you'll learn. It's pretty simple. Basically, switch is just like another way. You can also do this with an if statement. I just like switches because they're nice to read. But basically what we'll be doing is we'll be passing in item.get item ID. Okay. And now the way switches work is you have cases. So let's say the case is that get item ID is r.id.settings. Basically, this is the equivalent of just saying if item.getItemID equals r.id.settings, which means, oh, it was the settings that's clicked on. Well, now this will run. And now you just say what we want to do in the case that it was settings that was clicked on. Okay, so we're going to have to create a new activity. Well, basically what's happening is when they click on settings, a new activity is starting. And we do that with intents. So intents, intent, oh, oops. Intents, intent, sorry. Not needs to recognize intent. There we go. Intent equals new intent. And if you remember now, we're going to pass in, well, first get application context, first parameter. And second is the activity we want to start. And we haven't created it yet, but let's just call it settings activity.class. Okay. And if you don't remember this, I'll include the link to the intents tutorial I made as well. Okay, now we're just going to start activity intent. And because it expects a boolean to be returned, let's just return true. Okay. So now that we're done with the case that it's settings, let's say it's the case that it is actually the what's the other button? Reload. Huh. I guess we forgot. Did I forget to pass or give it a ID? Oh, you did. ID, reload. Okay, now it should work. Okay, there we go. Now I got it. Okay, so what happens if we're reloading? Well, I'll show you. First, we have to implement all the text views and everything. Okay, great. So now we have to create the settings activity. So this will also just be another activity. So we know how to do that. Go to new activity and let's do an empty activity. And we have to call it settings activity. Okay, finish. Let's watch this error go away. It recognizes there's, okay, there we go. So now it knows there's a settings activity. Great. Okay. Now that we have created the activity that will show the settings, we now have to, create the template for the settings. So I'll actually put this on the side so we know, so you can look at it and kind of understand what's going on. So let me just, there we go. Okay. So what's going to happen is, once again, we have to create a new res folder. Okay. So the way this one will actually be called, it won't actually be called preferences. It's actually just going to be a plain old XML file. I'm not sure why that is, but it's just the way it is. So let's click OK. And there we go. Now we have an XML directory. And within this, we obviously have to create a new XML resource file. And we can just call this preferences. So the way this works is, well, again, there's not an easy editor screen, but that's because it's very straightforward exactly how you'll be setting it up. So the first thing that you'll notice is, well, all of this is within a preference screen. So it's kind of like there's a hierarchy. And the next thing is that, first of all, there's account settings, okay? And that's its own category. So we'll do preference category. The title is account settings, okay? And that's basically all there is to the category. Well, at least we'll be adding things to the category, but that's really the only attribute we'll be specifying is that there's a title and it's account settings. Okay, so now we're just going to, well, we added the second part, so now everything can go within that. And what goes in that? Well, there's actually, I made this so there's 3 different types of preferences. If you look, there's actually quite a few different types you can have, but we'll be learning how to do the edit text. There's a switch and a multi-select list preference. I think those are some pretty good ones that show really how they work. Okay, so the first one is an edit text, because if you click on username, an edit text opens up. Okay, and the great thing is that lots of this is basically everything's implemented for you. So you just type in edit text preference. Okay, now let's specify some attributes. Title is, well, user name. Okay, now this key, this is comparable to the ID, and basically you need this key to be able to access this certain preferences value later. So let's just give it username. And actually, if you didn't give it a key, this would not save anywhere. So as soon as you left the settings screen and you came back and looked at the whatever the username was set to, it just wouldn't have anything. So okay, so these are the 2 things for the edit text. Okay, the next one is a multi-select list preference. Okay, so multi-select list preference, and there's a few more things we have to specify here. So first, there's well, obviously there's a title. Let's call it services. Okay, there's a key. Let's also call it services. But now it needs 2 things that are different. It needs entries, and it also needs entry values. What's the difference? Well, entries is basically an array of what the user will see, and then entry values is really what the app, whatever those correspond to. And in this case, because we're just going to be, printing whatever they select on the screen, these will basically be the same. But how are we going to pass, an array into an XML file? Well, we have to make yet another resource file. And actually, this is it'll go in values. And if you notice, there's string styles. Strings actually has like app names. So if you look in the manifest and you've seen like, I'll show you. If you look in the manifest and you see that the label is, it went away because I was put my mouse on it. Okay, you see it says the label is string app name. Well, that actually just corresponds to, in the string file, app name is that. So that's really what shows up. But we need to create one for an array. Okay, so we're going to right click on values. We're going to go to values resource file. And this isn't we just have to make it ourselves. So we'll type in arrays. Okay. And now within that XML, basically it'll be another hierarchy type thing. Okay, so first we have within this there's a string array, and we'll call it services. Okay, we'll close that. We just need that. Okay, and now within that, well, first let's put the string array. Why is it? Sorry. There we go. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. Actually, if it's a case like this, where you have to close it, just type in this arrow and this the forward slash and it'll finish it like that. That's the easier way. Okay, and now we are going to start adding items. So it's item, and well, the first one is just mail. You don't even have to put brackets around it. It just knows. Item. Okay. Calendar. Oops. And item. I'm just doing the left, the right-facing arrow, and it auto-completes the rest of it. And then we'll just put contacts. Okay. So now we've made our array resource, and now we can just reference it from the preferences XML, just as @array services, and likewise @array services. Okay, cool. So now that's everything for the account settings category. Now we need something for app settings. So we have to close this. Okay. So that'll be another preference category. Oops. Preference category. Let's just space it out. Okay. And the title will be, well, app settings. Okay. Okay. What goes in that? Well, there's just one thing, and it is a switch preference, because you see, well, it's just a switch, and the title is notifications, because maybe not the user doesn't want notifications from this app. Okay, and then obviously we need a key, and that'll just be notifications. Okay, and then we can just close that off and save this, and now we have basically this XML corresponds to this menu. Now that we have made the XML, it is time to implement that into the layout. So I'll now be introducing you into a concept called fragments. And what fragments are mainly used for is extending your application to work well on larger screens such as tablets. Essentially how they work is you have two fragments, one on the left and one on the right, and that's how you have like a two-pane layout. But in this case, fragments are just will just be used to display the XML onto the activity settings layout. And in this case, because r.layout.activity settings, if you look at it, is just blank, it'll just look like it's on a blank screen. Okay, so we are going to create a new class within this class called public. Well, it'll be a public static class preference screen fragment, and it will extend something that's already been made for us called a preference fragment. And that's good because most of the work is done for us then, and we just have to override the onCreate method. And I think by now you have a pretty good understanding of when onCreate is called. It's called when it's created. Okay, and there's only really one line we have to add. It is just add preference from resource. We'll pass an r.xml.preferences, and there we go. Now how this will work is when, there's one more thing. So if you think about it, we're not really using this yet because we created this class, but we now have to basically put it into the layout. And this will be done by, well, first we get the fragment manager. We'll begin a transaction, and that will be to replace, what are we replacing? So this is just part of the documentation, android.r.id.content. This is basically saying replace that content, or whatever is currently there, with a new preference screen fragment, which is what we just created, and we have to say .commit. And there we go. So now when this runs, obviously this is not exactly what we wrote, but it'll work the same way. Now when we click on the settings option, as we know from the main activity, we said start a new intent, which starts the settings activity class. In the settings activity, we're doing the typical onCreate stuff. But then we're calling the fragment manager, and we're basically putting a preference screen fragment on the screen. And in the preference screen fragment, we just have we're adding the preferences that we want. And that's why we have the screen, because we just specified our XML.preferences to be exactly this. So I promise you we are almost at the end. So what's left now is, well, we have to get the values that the user sets and display them in some way on the screen. And this is something we are hopefully pretty good at by now. First we have, well, in the layout, activity main, we just need 3 text views. Okay, so let's just drag in 3 large texts. 1, 2, 3. You can format it however you want, but you know. So the first one is just the username and ID username. Ooh. Okay. And now this one is services. Services. Ah. And then the last one is notifications. And notifications. And well, obviously we'll be changing it, so not exactly these will be showing up. And I don't like how they're not taking up the whole line. So let's just set well, it's set to wrap content. So basically what wrap content does is it means these text views will be as big as the text inside them is. So yeah. So we can just leave it how it is. And actually, there we go. This is better, I guess. Let's align these up. Okay, much better. Okay, so we'll be updating these texts to actually say something other than username, services, notifications now. Okay, so in case you missed it, actually, I'll do that again. But we just changed the IDs to be username, services, and notifications. And we need those to bind the views to a layout, or views to a variable, so we can then access it in the layout. So in main activity, now we will just be doing something we've done many times, text view. First is a username, text view. Okay, text view. Services text view, and then text view notifications text view. Okay, and then now we can do, well, username text view equals text view find view by dr.id.text. Oh, no, it's not text view. It is username. Sorry. Okay. So in case you need a quick recap, basically we're saying find the view by the ID, and we're passing in an ID, which is just username, and we have to cast it back to a text view because this returns a view, and we're setting it to username text view. Okay. And basically we'll be doing something very similar for the next 3 lines. So let's just copy paste. Okay. So instead we'll be doing this with services text view, and the ID is services, and this one is notifications text view, and it'll just be notifications. Okay, great. So now we have to edit the text in them, and to access whatever the user sets, we are going to use something called shared preferences. And these are a really nice implementation of how to just save key value pairs in your application. And the preferences screens are actually basically built to implement with shared preferences. However, you can add whatever you want in shared preferences as well, and it is quite simple. But it's really, really easy to access what the user sets. So we're just going to have a shared preferences variable, and we'll just call it preferences. Okay. And basically what needs to happen is we need to assign preferences to something. And we're just going to set preferences equal to get, not get yet, it's preference manager dot get default shared preferences, and we're just going to pass in this. You can also just put get application context. I think both will work. So I'll actually try that after this and let you know. But let's just go ahead and change it right now. If it doesn't work, then we'll know immediately, I guess. Okay, get application context. So the way it actually works is, we'll set the username text view to be, set text, and we're going to do preferences dot, username will be a string, so we'll get string, and now the first parameter is actually the key. Do you remember what the key was? Well, let's go back to the preferences. We set the key to be username. Okay, great. So we'll just put username. Okay, and the default value, like I just put error. You know, if there's no username, there's an error. Okay, great. Okay, now for the services, because it's a list, it's a bit more complicated. So the way it actually works is it'll return a set to us. So we'll have a set with type string. Let's call it services set equals preferences dot get string set. The key was actually just services, and the default, let's just make it null, because we could instantiate, we could just instantiate a new set, but null also works, so let's just go with that. And now, just to make it easier to print, we're just going to convert this into a services array. And basically, if you convert it to an array, you can just easily call print on it. So we're just going to services set dot to array, and we're going to specify what type of array. So it'll be a new string, and the length will just be services set dot size. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. We just got the size. We're creating a string of that size, and we're going to set services set to an array, basically a string array. Okay, and then we can do services text view dot set text, and we're just going to do arrays dot to string, and you can just type in services array. Okay, and now it'll print whatever services the user chose. And then notifications text view dot set text. Well, now we'll do the same, preferences dot get, this is a boolean this time. The key is notifications, and the default, let's just put false. And because we're trying to print a boolean, we really just have to change it into a string. So you can just concatenate it with the empty string, and that always just converts it into a string. Okay, great. So now when this is run, we'll see this on the screen. However, really the issue is that if you know something about the Android activity lifecycle, onCreate is really only called when it starts. However, when you go to like settings here, and then you go back, it isn't created again. It was kind of just stored in memory, so onCreate isn't called again. But if we just call all those again, when reload is clicked on, then it'll change. So basically all we're going to do is just copy all this and put it in the reload case we had there, and just return true afterwards. Okay. And if we did everything correctly, this will now work. So I'll run it and show you guys. And just one more thing, actually, just because this, if you remember when we go to Android manifest, this label was set to string name, string app name, and actually Android Studio just shows you wherever the value really is if you click on it. So really, it's really set to app name, but if you click on it, I don't know, sometimes it shows what it is. But we can, now that we know how to deal with it, instead of changing the label here, so so we change this, let's actually change it in where it really is defined, string app name. So let's go to strings and app name. Let's call it preference menus and preferences, and let's just leave it there. Okay, or actually let's give it a better name, because let's actually give it something that defines what it is. So really it's I guess just user settings, or settings. Okay, sure, because it's really just showing the settings on the screen, so that's really what the app name should be. Okay, so I'll run this and show you guys what it does. So actually when I started running this, it crashed, and this is a good lesson now in understanding these error messages. So the issue it's basically saying is that it was unable to start some activity, null pointer exception, because Java util.setSize on a null object reference, well, that's basically error. And if you scroll down, there's always going to be something highlighted in, or like in blue, and if you click on it, it'll take you to the line of the error. So basically the issue is that, remember how I set this to null? Well, the problem now is that when the app is first started, because none of these have really been initialized yet, like there's no value set in them, it's just going to be null. So let's go ahead and add something there. So if what is it? Services set is not equal, or rather does not equal null, then we can do these next few lines. And then we have to obviously reflect these changes down here as well. Well, actually, yeah, let's go ahead and do it, sure. Okay, so set string, and then we don't need, no, these two lines go. Okay, so now this should work. So everything worked this time, which means that get application context also works here. Great. But if you notice now, so it makes sense that this one defaulted to error because we hadn't set anything yet. This one defaulted to false. But why is this one defaulting to services? Well, if you remember in the original layout, we actually just set this text view to say services. So because we're not really changing it ever, or yet, it just shows services. Okay, so now we can just demo what we made and be proud of it. So here we are, we have a screen here. Let's go to settings, username. Let's call it like we had before, like, let's do world hello actually. Okay, services. Well, let's do mail and contacts. And we want notifications, sure. So let's go back. And now when we click on reload, there we go. We have world hello, contacts and mail, and true. And that reflects what we set. So just a really quick recap, because I know this was kind of long, but we'll get through it. So basically what we had to do first is create a menu folder, and we just specified that there's two items. There's settings and a reload, and we set the icon, show as action always, and an ID. And then we also created a preference XML, which had preference categories, and that an edit text and a multi-select list preference. And then we had a switch preference, and that's that. Okay, and then in the main activity, we called onCreateOptions menu, and we inflated the menu, and we passed in the r.menu activity main. And then we said on options item selected. If it's settings, we start an intent to go to settings activity, and if it's reload, we'll just reload or reset all the edit text views. Okay, settings activity is we're using fragments, and basically what the fragments is doing is just adding a preference from resource. So it's basically overlaying this preference we created on the screen. Okay, and it's just showing that. And then in main activity, what we're doing is we're using shared preferences to basically get the value using the key that we assigned in the preferences XML. So I hope that all makes sense. And as always, if you have questions, please let me know.